What's up, everyone? Welcome back. Patrick here. Moving on to the next example, dealing with more operations with rational expressions. So notice we are dividing these two rational expressions here. These are multivariable. So when I'm going through the factoring, I'm going to go through it in a little bit more detail in case you need a little bit more review on it, right? These are a little bit more complex. However, if you're fairly comfortable with factoring, then you can just skip ahead and see what the final answer is going to be. But I'm going to take my time with these a little bit more for the people that need it. So what are the steps here? Well, remember, number one, we factor everything. And then number two, we get the restrictions. And then number three, we simplify, right? We get the restrictions before we simplify. So let's go into factoring. Let's start with this first numerator. So I got 5x squared minus 17xy plus 6y squared. So remember, what we're doing first is we are multiplying the a and the c value, which is going to be positive 30. We're finding out two numbers that are going to multiply to positive 30 and add up to the b value of negative 17. And notice in this case, it's going to be negative 15 and negative 2, right? Negative 15, negative 2, like that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to decompose that middle term, the negative 17xy, into these two numbers. So minus 15xy minus 2xy plus 6y squared, like that, right? Just took that middle term, made it into these two terms right here, right? I decomposed it. That's where the name decomposition comes from. And you might have different ways that you factor this. So whatever way you do it, just make sure you're getting the same answer. So now we do by grouping. So what can I take out of these two? I could take out a 5x. So we'd be left with what? X minus 3y, right? Be careful with your variables. And then from these two, I could take out a 2y, but because this is negative, we always take out that sign as well. So I could take out a 2y, and I'd be left with x minus 3y, like that. And then these two brackets should always be the same in this process. If they're not, then you know something is off. So this first numerator here, that's going to factor into 5x minus 2y, x minus 3y. And then the denominator, so x squared minus 9y squared, this is actually going to be a difference of squares. So we got this x squared minus, okay, the 9y squared I could rewrite as 3y squared, like that, right? Difference of squares, so we'll have x minus 3y, x plus 3y, like that. So this is going to be x minus 3y, x plus 3y. Okay, now this next trinomial, the next numerator, so we're going to have what? 25x squared minus 20xy plus 4y squared. So let's actually just figure out the numbers first. So 25 times 4 is 100, positive 100. Be careful with your signs as well, right? If this was minus 4y squared, that would be negative 100. And then we have to figure out two numbers that multiply to that and add up to the negative 20, which is going to be negative 10. Negative 10. So this is actually going to end up being a perfect square trinomial, I believe, right? So if we take 25x squared, if we decompose that middle term into these two terms, negative 10xy plus 4y squared, what can I factor out of these two? I could take out a 5x, right? So 5x minus 2y. And then from these two, I could take out a minus 2y. 5x minus 2y, like that, right? Taking out negative 2y from the 10xy, I have 5x. 4y squared divided by negative 2y is negative 2y. And as expected, these two brackets are the same, and we're left with the 5x minus 2y. So the factors are the same. Like I mentioned, it's a perfect square trinomial. Whenever you're doing decomposition and these two numbers that you get are the same, it's going to end up being a perfect square trinomial. So we're dividing by 5x minus 2y, 5x minus 2y, like that. And then this final denominator here, the 4x squared plus 13xy plus 3y squared. So let's right away find out what two numbers are multiplying of 4 times 3, which is 12, and then adding up to that b value of 13. In this case, it's what? 12 and 1? Positive 12 and 1? Oh, not 21, 12 and 1. like that, right? 12 times 1 is 12, 12 plus 1 is 13. So we're going to take that trinomial right here, and we're going to decompose that middle term into the 12 and the 1. So that's going to be what? 4x squared plus 12xy. Don't forget your two variables there, right? All it tells us is what we're decomposing the 13 into, right? But we got to include the variables as well, plus 1xy, which is just xy plus 3y squared, like that, right? So I took this 13, decomposed it into these two terms. Now, what do we have to do? Factor by grouping. I could take out a 4x from these two, so I'd have x plus 3y. And then from these two, I could take out a y, and I'd be left with x plus 3y. Then I could take out an x plus 3y. I'd be left with 4x plus y, like that, right? So we end up having x plus 3y, 4x plus y, like that. Okay, so at this point, everything is factored, and now what we have to do is get our restrictions, okay? And you got to be careful here because usually, yes, we get the restrictions from the denominators, correct? But notice because we're dividing by something, whatever we're dividing by, we also get the restrictions from the numerator, right, of the thing that we're dividing by. In this case, these two factors are the same, so just one of them will do. Now, with the multivariables, when you're doing the restrictions, you could either isolate for the x or the y. It doesn't matter. Usually, they will, more often than not, isolate for the x, okay? But you have to be able to isolate for both. Maybe it's a multiple choice, and then their restrictions are going to be y can't be something, right? But usually it's x can't be something in terms of y. So let's do these one by one. So the x minus 3y. So the x minus 3y, this factor can't be 0. So if we isolate for the x, we would say x cannot be 3y, like that. So that is one restriction right there. If you isolated for the y, what would happen is you would have x cannot equal 3y, and then you'd have to divide both sides by 3. And so you would have y cannot equal x over 3. That would be the restriction if you isolate for the y, or 1/3 x. X over 3, 1/3 x, they are the same. Okay, but in this one, we're just going to isolate for the x's, but again, you got to be flexible and perhaps know how to isolate for the y's as well if this is going to be like a multiple choice and their restrictions are going to be y cannot be something in terms of x. Okay, so x can't be positive 3y here. X plus 3y cannot equal 0, which means x cannot equal negative 3y. Okay, so that's going to be another restriction. The x plus 3y we just did. Okay, 4x plus y cannot equal 0, which means that 4x cannot equal negative y. Divide both sides by 4, so x cannot equal negative y over 4. So that's going to be the restriction from this factor. And then finally, the 5x minus 2y can't be 0, which means 5x can't be 2y, which means x cannot equal 2y over 5, like that. So that's going to be the restriction from the numerator of the expression that we are dividing by. And so from here, after we get our restrictions, we're going to simplify. So the next step is basically we take the rational expression that we're dividing by. I just flipped it and then turned the sign into multiplication. And then once it's multiplying, you could see what crosses out from the numerator and denominator. So notice that this x plus 3y, that's common. 5x minus 2y, that's common there. X minus 3y, those cancel out. And then I don't think anything else cancels out, right? So what are we left with? We're just left with the 4x plus y at the top and one more factor of the 5x minus 2y at the bottom because we only canceled out one of them with this factor over here, right? So this ends up being the final answer, and then those are your restrictions.
And that is the end of the video. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you want to find more videos like this, you can go to my website, allthingsmathematics.com. Over there, all my courses are organized for both high school and university. All the videos are organized by chapter. Also, if you have any questions, you can hit me up. My contact details are also on the website. Enjoy your day, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.